Hello, welcome to Record Sports Hotline Live. My name is Daniel Corr. I'm delighted to be joined by Keith Jackson, but a rather tired, worn out Keith Jackson
It's
after
not.
that.
I've got the heebie-jeebies. Do you know what? I've just had to write 1,000 words on that, and my sort of a way into it was this is a journey for the ages. This is us getting towards a first World Cup in almost 30 years. It should be the most fun that a Scotland fan could have when his kilt's still on, and it's turning into an absolute ordeal.
Oh, that was absolutely brutal. Absolutely brutal.
But there we go. We've got 6 points. And if you offered us the 6 points, we would have absolutely bitten your hand off for it. I know that Denmark and Greece will be kicking off in 45 minutes in Copenhagen. But as things stand, we're sitting top of the group. 10 points from 12. And this is what we'll laugh about it one day, Dan, is that this is only possible under Steve Clarke. Only he could take something that should be so much fun and so enjoyable and turn it into this stress ball. But do you know what? We love him for it. And I fully expect a lot of comments negative about the standard performance. I completely accept that. But we are so close to getting to a World Cup. This man, and I completely accept as well, when we've got to the major finals, Scotland really haven't, flung a serious punch at any point. So he's always going to have his detractors. But the facts are the facts, Daniel. 72 games in, he's qualified for 2 tournaments, and he might be about to break this sort of a self-imposed ban that we've put on ourselves for actually getting to something that the whole world wants to be at. So I'll take the results. I think the performances, that was nowhere near good enough tonight, the level of performance. But it's almost worth the stress, just getting there at the end and getting the points in the bag. And let's see what happens in Copenhagen, because, if I said previously, and I'm going to stick to it, I'd quite like that to be a draw. And I think we can get through this section as winners without even having to go through. But we're Scotland, so of course we're destined to go through some agony in the playoffs. But I think I'd take that, even though it means that the Greece are still alive, technically, going into the final 2 games.
See, James McFadden made a good point on commentary, I thought, where he said, look, how many times you've sat here at Hampden and thought we were brilliant tonight and we've got beat. We were absolutely rotten tonight and won. I mean, I know which I'd prefer every day of the week.
Oh, listen, you just need to take it. You just take the results. I'll be interested to see how Steve Clarke describes it. I'm pretty sure, because you heard his interview before the game, when it was put to him about getting the goal difference up and all, he's not interested. He'll say that Belarus are a decent side. They're not, the whipping boys that they were made out to be, even though results would suggest that that's exactly what they are. And he'll just be perfectly pleased to put another 3 points on the board. And that's what he said. At the end of it, they'll calculate whether enough points have been won, enough goals have been scored to get us through this group without the need to go through the playoffs. We could have done ourselves a favour tonight. We could have made it more enjoyable. But they got there. They got the win. And I think we just have to accept it.
Well, look, the comments are coming in already on Scotland's. It feels weird saying win, but it was a win tonight over Belarus. If you want to have your say, let us know what you thought of the performance and the result, and whether or not we're going to make it to the World Cup. And on top of that as well, Keith, we definitely have a lot to talk about in regards to the goings on at Rangers.
Now what's happening?
There's a little bit of news regarding Steven Gerrard that I'm sure we'll touch on later on.
And not entirely unexpected. Not here anyway, Dan. I've been saying to you for a while, something about it just never felt quite right for me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we'll come back to that later.
We'll come back to that. But some comments on the game tonight. look, as you said, Keith, they are, a lot of them are quite negative. The Gorgie Jambo says Steve Clark has not got a clue. This is as painful as watching Craig Brown's teams. We've got great players and he's not got a clue. The Green Machine says that old Scottish saying comes to mind. We were ranked rotten from start to finish, the same as the last game. Mark says playoff is the only way we can get to the finals, and make no mistake, with more performances like that, we'll be the whipping boys of our group. But Tommy's goal doesn't hide that he's the worst player. John, though, says 3 points all that matters. We've already forgotten about all the poor
Ballon d'Or nominee Scott McTominay. That guy.
I know, the worst player on the team.
Yeah.
Scott, John says, we forgot about the performances on the road to Germany. Scott says, dull as the manager, lucky win. And David says, another absolutely shocking performance from Scotland. The home midfield posted missing. So much for Gilmour McTominay playing in Serie A. I mean, they do play in Serie A. Look, it wasn't a great night. No one's pretending otherwise. But
no, I tell you what I wouldn't do is watch that and then raise Billy Gilmour as an issue, because he was the last thing that was an issue in that team. Billy Gilmour adds composure, a bit of craft on midfield. He knows how to keep the ball. He knows how to pass it, distribute it. He wouldn't come into my sights in terms of looking at where we went wrong and what went wrong about that performance tonight. Ben Doak as well. Every time he got the ball,
he was
and
brilliant.
he got his little pistons pumping. That was exciting. That was fun to watch.
Yeah.
I could watch Billy Gilmour all day in the centre midfield. But I do accept Mark's point about McTominay. He's looked really off it in the 2 games that we've just come through. We'll need so much more from him and our big players going into these final 2 games. I mean, it's going to get squeaky bum time, that's for sure. Athens to face the Greeks after the way that they played against us for over an hour the other night, and then Denmark come to Hampden. So this is it coming to the crunch time. And I tell you now, as difficult as a watch as these last 2 games have been, I just get this feeling that Steve Clark, contrary to what one of the guys just said there, he knows what he's doing.
Aye.
He knows what he's doing. And somehow, I think he's going to get us through this. As astonishing as that may seem right now.
No, listen, I completely agree. I'm just reading some of these comments that are coming in thick and fast. This one here from William. William says, no pass marks anywhere in the team. Gilmour gave the ball away more times than anyone else. Doak, no end result. I mean, look, we won the game. I know it wasn't great, but look.
There are some valid points there.
Aye.
Ben Doak needs to work on his final ball, that last little bit, and he'll get there. We're talking about a kid. The boy, he's a kid, but he's a great hope for us.
Yeah.
And once he polishes off and those little final aspects, his decision making, once he gets in and around the penalty box, needs to be improved. But he's got everything there in terms of what you want to see in a Scotland player. He loves getting the ball down. He loves running at people. He's pacey as anything, and he causes carnage. So let him grow into the shirt. Let's not give the boy a kicking. He was the one source of enjoyment out there tonight for most of that match. But yeah, these are all aspects that need to be improved. Was it Billy Gilmour's best game in a Scotland shirt? No. Do I think that he influenced the middle of the park? I absolutely do. Do I think that Steve Clark got the team right? Probably. Because what are your options there tonight? Do you go with Lennon Miller? And do you go with Kieran Dowd? Do you try and get... Well, that sounds great in theory. But Steve Clark probably had it worked out. He said, this is going to be a harder game than everybody's expecting it to be. They certainly made it look like that. But can you imagine how we'd be feeling right now if we'd thrown the youngsters into that from the start and we hadn't won it?
He'd be getting...
Oh, there'd be absolute dog's abuse flying. So, yes, it's a bit dull in terms of, I know that fans are crying out to see the new guys, but there's plenty of time for Bowie and Lennon Miller to kind of bleed themselves into this and hopefully get the enjoyment of representing the country at a World Cup next summer.
Aye, definitely. Look, I put it up on the screen just a minute ago that Michelle says crap game, but we got the points. For me, that sums it up. Control Alt Hayes says 3 points up the road. We mentioned earlier on that we are now, here we are, there's a shot at the table as it stands right now. This is obviously ahead of
now, who doesn't like seeing that?
Exactly. This is ahead of Denmark versus Greece that kicks off in about 25 minutes' time. But unbeaten in the group still, 2 games to go, and the simple arithmetic is win the 2 games, we're at the World Cup.
Unbeaten in the group, Daniel, and that includes starting this group off with the most difficult possible fixture of Denmark away.
Yeah.
And, absolutely, well, I completely understand and sympathise with a lot of the comments, a lot of the disappointment from the nature of these 2 Scotland performances. That board that you've just put up there, that's really all that matters. This is a World Cup, guys. And listen, I'm sure there are people watching this right now that can't remember, weren't alive when Scotland last played at World Cup. This is monumentally important, and we're right on the cusp now. We've got ourselves into this situation. Steve Clarke and the players have got us into this situation where we're going into next month, 2 more games, win them both, we're there.
And I should say, if Denmark win tonight, then we are...
The least that we can get is a second place finish.
Guaranteed a playoff spot. But as we say, look, you win the 2 games, Denmark's at home. I mean, imagine if we can somehow go to Greece, get a result there. Imagine a shootout against Denmark on the final night at Hampden. I mean, what occasion that would be.
I mean, there's the potential that if we could go to Greece and just avoid defeat.
You're right. You're right.
Then would set us up, depending on what happens in this game tonight, obviously.
You're right.
It could potentially set us up for a winner-takes-all game against the Danes at Hampden. And that's not going to be easy, far from it. But is it impossible for this Scotland side? Absolutely not. As hard as they made that look tonight, and as hard work as it was for us to sit and watch it, they are absolutely capable.
Aye, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I've got so many comments coming in, and thank you if you're watching at home. You want to get involved in the conversation, please do so. The only thing is, Keith, I don't want to labour this because they are so negative. I mean, guys, we won. We managed to win it. I'll read out a few and maybe get your take on it, Keith, before we move on to the Rangers stuff. KR says, so if there's plenty of time for the likes of Lennon Miller, how long did they have to wait? That mob are so bad. We played so poorly. We made them look okay. Doco says it's a golden age of Scottish players and Clark, is ruining it.
Blowing it.
That's a good point, eh? Sorry, I've lost my place. Alex says, we're not going to win the last 2 games. No chance. KR again, we looked really promising about halfway through last Euros campaign. Lost the plot since McGinn and McTominay. Look well off it these days. And there's even people, if I can find it, accusing us of protecting Steve Clarke. There we are. We're protecting Steve Clarke, Keith, apparently. So
this is what these guys don't understand. With the greatest will in the world, if I wanted to, why would I want to protect Steve Clarke? Steve Clarke ask any journalist that follows Scotland that does the beat. He's pretty unresponsive. He's not a guy that, he can be hard work at press conferences. He doesn't do anything to make our jobs easier in terms of communication or, answering, stuff that's off the record. There's nothing. He's not a guy that makes our job easier to do.
Aye.
But he is a guy that makes our job going to 2 European championships and potentially a World Cup. So there is no reason that I know of any journalist around the whole Scotland setup that they're going to go out their way to protect Steve Clarke, other than the fact that there's a consensus, I think, probably still, in fact, definitely still, a consensus that he's doing a job which is making Scotland a more successful side than it's been, as I said, for nearly 3 decades. Yeah. And there are downsides to it, but I think you take them.
Aye.
For as long as, and this is going to be his last campaign. So we're fairly certain of that. I'd love him to qualify us for a World Cup, become the first manager to get Scotland to 3 tournaments. And then, do you know what, Steve? Do us all a favour. See if you do get there. Going to take the gloves off. Going to take the handbrake off.
Just go for it.
Please allow us to enjoy it. Because, as I said, these last 2 games have been an ordeal. And yet, we're still, bobbling along. We're still heading in the direction that we want to be in.
I mean, look, this one again, Doco says Russell Martin could have coached Scotland to the Euros. Look, that's all well and good saying, but I mean, we lived through 20 odd years of not getting to a single tournament.
That's a ridiculous statement.
Aye, it's mad. But I'm just pointing out because anyone could have got to the Euros. Well, listen, nobody could for 20 years. So when the guy finally gets us there, I think you need to hold your hands up and go.
Look, there's a couple of things that's true. One, obviously, the Euros have been expanded, correct? So, it did increase our chances, but there's plenty of teams that didn't get, plenty of countries that haven't qualified for the last 2.
Yep.
And that was traditionally a Scottish trait. We didn't get to these tournaments. What was the other point? What was the second point of that?
Actually, there's so many comments. I think I've actually lost it now. We've got plenty of comments. I'll round off on the Scotland ones then, Keith, and get your take on them. Andy says, I'm happy we won, but surely we have to find someone better than Ralston at right back if we want to win the last 2 games. I know, exactly. Where are we going? I know. Aaron Hickey as well.
Aaron Hickey's the guy that's better than Tony Ralston at right back.
And he would have been playing if he was fit.
Yeah, but, his hamstring tweaked again. Hopefully, it's not too serious and he will make a full recovery in time for next month. But we can't just magic up right back.
Ibroxonian says, surely if we lose to Greece, a win takes us through if we beat Denmark on head-to-head in the final game. I've seen a lot of people say this, but I think it's goal difference, crucially. So,
well, Denmark are well ahead in goal difference.
Exactly. So it's not like we drew in Denmark and then beat them at Hampden. We're through. It's goal difference, sadly, which is annoying.
That's not a head-to-head.
Aye. Yeah. And just finally on Scotland, Joseph says, Keith and Daniel, you go over there, you start managing the team, and you both pick the team. So, look, listen, maybe when we get done with this, we can have a word with Steve Clark, see if he needs any help.
I think that's the last thing Steve Clark needs. Well, you know what? And because I've done it myself, Daniel, when I was in Copenhagen for the first game of the group, I looked at his team sheet. I was almost manic depressive. When I looked at the team sheet, I thought, what are you doing? And do you know what? He knew what he was doing. It wasn't pretty. I thought we gave up the midfield. I don't know why he didn't start Billy Gilmore. He went with the 2 strikers. You're thinking, what are you seeing that nobody else is seeing here? But actually what he did was he tried to put more physicality in the team. As he previously, from the when we get a bit of a doing against Denmark previously, he kind of worked out one of the major problems was Scotland couldn't get up the pitch. Mm-hmm. So he went with 2 strikers to give them a sort of landing platform. With Dykes. Dykes must have won, I don't know how many headers he won on that night. But it was all really carefully considered and part of a strategic plan that nobody else would have worked out apart from Stevie Clark. And sometimes because of that, I think there's a tendency to beat him over the head. See, as long as the results keep coming, and they are, I can't be overcritical. He might not be doing it in the way that the rest of us might think is the best way, but there's a reason why the rest of us aren't doing it and he is.
No, I echo that as well. And look, comments keep coming in. Please let us know your thoughts on Scotland's World Cup quest. Steve Clark and all the players who you thought played well, who didn't. But for now, Keith, I think we need to talk about Rangers, because since we were last on the Hotline Live, big breaking news: Steven Gerrard will not be the next Rangers manager.
I don't think we can describe it as breaking news now, Dan.
Not now. Since
maybe 24 hours ago.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. As I said, I don't know. Did I give off the vibe? I think I did. That previously, I just wasn't sure about Gerard, and I know that I mentioned it previously in the summer when there was all this chat. There was people telling us all press conferences booked for 3 o'clock tomorrow, and security's coming. And I said, look, we've been here, and I think the Rangers fans should remember that and factor that into how they're feeling right now, because once again it was being kind of held up as a fait accompli. I never felt that it was that. Actually, the more you look at it, you wonder if by coming to Great Britain, returning to Great Britain to fly into Heathrow, it was almost more of a courtesy visit. I am entirely sure that he wanted to hear what they had to say, but I would kind of revert to what we were saying last week, Daniel. Steven Gerrard wasn't coming for an interview, not to be interviewed. He was coming to interview them.
Yeah.
And it was entirely dependent upon what sort of answers he got, you know, and there was also, and I referred to this from day one, that the financial and family kind of issues that prevented him from wanting to be considered a serious candidate in the summer haven't changed. So they were still there. So was there a way that they were going to suddenly shift? I found that unlikely. But I think it centres around, and this is where it's going to get really dangerous now for Andrew Kavanagh, because I think his credibility could be, you know, absolutely blown apart here if he's not really careful with the decisions he makes and the people that he listens to over the next wee while, because it's starting to look, to all intents and purposes, as if he's nailing his colours to Kevin Thelwell's mast. And everything that you're hearing about how the conversation went with Gerard would lead you to believe that Kavanagh wasn't in a place or a position where he felt he wanted to sacrifice Thelwell to get Gerrard in. In other words, he was backing Thelwell over Steven Gerrard, if that's the case.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, he's got a monumental credibility problem with Rangers support. They've made up their mind about Kevin Thelwell. As I said last week, Kevin Thelwell is not part of the solution. He's a major part of the problem. And if Rangers are going to stick stubbornly to this kind of management structure that they've put in place, if the guy that was previously the manager, the first team manager, was asked to take the job but in different terms, you're a head coach this time, you're answerable to Kevin Thelwell, and he'll, by the way, he'll be in charge of what players you get into Auchenhowie. If that's the decision that the Americans are making here, then what's the phrase I've said all along, Daniel? This will get worse before it gets better.
Yep.
By saying that, I thought they need to get used to the environment. They need to understand it. They need to make mistakes in order to learn from them. What they can't do is make mistakes and then make the same mistakes over and over again. This felt to me like a point where, yes, mistakes have been made, so you correct those mistakes, and then you move on. You've got a sort of blank canvas again. They don't have a blank canvas. They've got a canvas that's got Kevin Thelwell's thumbprints all over it. And now they're moving on to a guy that Kevin Thelwell targeted in the summer, but didn't think was as good as Russell Martin, clearly, because he didn't move for him.
Yeah.
So this is a guy that Kevin Thelwell would have to admit he fancies even less than Russell Martin, but he's emerging as the front runner. By the way, a guy who's been a manager for less than 2 full seasons, and his only full season as being a manager, he came 12th in the English Championship. And I know there's all sorts of reasons around the problems that Sheffield Wednesday have had over the period in terms of ownership and all that, but that is the CV. That's what he is in the running for the Rangers job. A 12th place finish in England's Championship. Is somebody having a laugh? Because I'm telling you now, the Rangers support, if, you know, they were almost prepared to give Russell Martin a chance, even though they had their deep suspicions that it was going to turn out exactly as it did. But I think because Andrew Kavanagh had just come in, there was a whole new regime, I think there was a willingness to, okay, let's see how this works out. That willingness and goodwill is not going to be there for Danny Rall, if that's what it is, and it's another Kevin Thelwell appointment. There will be no wriggle room. He will start even more under the cosh than Russell Martin was. And it looks to be heading only in one direction. And let me tell you, it's not a healthy direction. And the problem that Andrew Kavanagh has is I think the Rangers supporters want to believe in him and want to believe in his changes. And he almost took ownership of the whole thing, didn't he? With the open letter, yeah, me and Paraga, we're going to head this up. We'll take personal responsibility. And the first thing that he do is arrange chat with Steven Gerrard, get him to fly to London. And Rangers support at that point, I think we're looking at going, right, this is real leadership, right? They understand now, they get it. And then they can't get Gerard over the line. Is that because they think Thelwell is more important to the operation? And then ultimately, having let that one collapse, they've then turned back to Kevin Thelwell and said, right, what's your list? Who's on that? All right, Danny Roll from the last time. This is, I mean, in terms of PR, the optics around this are a spectacular car crash. Incredible stuff.
Look, we've got plenty of comments on, excuse me, coming in on this. As you can see on the screen there, Scott says, I'm starting to think the new manager coach will not be in place by Saturday's game. Dale says, Roller is a disaster waiting to happen. 38% win rate. Sheffield Wednesday are a tiny club. This one here, this is really childish, but I had to put this up, Keith. Rangers have been knocked back more times than John Merrick at a speed dating event. I just couldn't resist. Sorry. Foldsy says, look at the candidates allegedly been spoken to. They have Thelwell's fingerprints all over them. Out of work coaches from English football. The American era is going to be non-stop choppy waters. Luke says, we need to back whoever the new manager is, even if it's Danny Roll. The Great Wall says, Keith, it's not financial, it's Thelwell. Marzuno says, if Rangers go for McInnes, they could get knocked back by 2 Rangers men in a week. And Craig says, Stevie walked away because of the squad and their contracts, overpaid championship players. Great Wall also wants Stephen Robinson. Why is he not being talked about? And David Watson, regular Jambo, simply says, keep away from Derek McInnes. I mean, you mentioned Danny Roll.
Well, David, you can rest easy because they seem absolutely determined to keep themselves away from Derek McInnes, which makes no obvious sense to anybody that's even paying a passing interest to this fiasco. There has been no attempt to reach out to Derek McInnes. There has been no attempt to reach out to Kevin Muscat. And there was no attempt to even check in with Barry Ferguson and say, see if we don't have a manager lined up. Any chance you can do this for a couple of months again? No attempt has been made to reach out to the very people that probably have got a real understanding of what's required. And instead, they're just going down Kevin Thelwell's blue sky playbook. I find it extraordinary. I really do. And this is what I'm saying. If Andrew Kavanagh has got a moment just to pause and have a think about this, he'll maybe understand that he's about to take a very dangerous turn.
Look, what do I know, right? This is just my opinion, but we touched on it last week. There's a clip that's actually been shared about from this show, Keith, today. I noticed it on X of both you and I saying, look, it just can't be Danny Rowe. And look, he might come in, he might be the new Pep Guardiola, it might be fantastic, but Rangers fans don't want another championship darling who, goes on about XG and stuff like that. They want a proven manager who knows what it takes to manage a club like Rangers. And I know I sound like a bit of a dinosaur, but it just seems too much like Russell Martin to me.
I think that's probably unfair. I think he's probably, and I'm told that he's not as. But again, this is another reason for questioning the kind of strategy behind it, if it was to be Danny Rowe, because he's not like Russell Martin. He's the opposite in terms of he hasn't got a set in stone philosophy about how he wants the game to be played. He'll treat every opponent on their merits and devise what he thinks is a game plan specifically and bespoke for whatever that game looks like on the Saturday. So that's different. But it is because it's so different. Then why is he on the same bit of paper as the name of Russell Martin?
Exactly. Aye, good point.
None of it is making any sense. None of it looks like joined up thinking. It looks like panic stuff, panic ridden. And I'm sorry, in terms of you, I think you said, what was you described as something of the championship?
A championship darling, young up and coming manager.
How was he that? He came 12th in the championship.
Aye, good point. And look,
that's all I can point to in terms of his managerial experience. His best performance as a manager has been coming 12th in England's championship. I ask again, on what possible basis, in which crazy universe would that be enough to merit an inclusion in a discussion about who's going to be the next manager of Rangers?
And look, it's a tiny sample size, but Russell Martin Southampton beat his Sheffield Wednesday 4-0. So, so I mean, look, who knows? But on this, then, look, Keith, we're talking about Danny Raw. Do you anticipate there's going to be a few more big twists and turns, maybe even a name or two we've not heard about?
I don't know, because we're getting very late in the day for that.
Yeah.
They don't have anybody in at Oakenhowie to take the team for training. They've got a game against Dundee United. They haven't gone interim. They haven't set up an interim staff. So I think they need somebody with his boots on the ground in Glasgow by Wednesday at the very latest. And I think they'll be working towards that. And from everything that we're hearing, even though it defies all logic, Danny Rowe looks to be the Russell Martin of this particular episode of Last Man Standing.
I mean, first of all, do you think they will get a man in place by Wednesday? Obviously, with the Dundee United game coming next weekend. And secondly, I mean, a lot of people just, Great Wall here saying McInnes or Robinson are the only ones that make sense. I get him asking you how long is a piece of string and I'm asking you to look into the future. But do you get any feeling that they might, do a bit of a U-turn and go and say, look, Derek or Stephen, would you be interested?
Because this is what I'm trying to explain to you. If they were going to do that, if they were minded to do that, they would have at least reached out by now. There would have been a conversation.
Yeah.
There's back channeling that goes on with these things. All the information I've got is that there has been no back channeling, no attempt to reach out, not even floating the idea or asking the question. There has been none of that with Derek McInnes. None of it with Muscat. And as I said, the no attempt to say to Barry Ferguson, "Are you going to be available for the next wee while?" So that leads you to believe that they must be, if they didn't have anybody, one of these calls would have to be getting made. The fact that none of them are getting made kind of suggests to me that they're quite far down the line with somebody else, and that somebody else right now looks like as if it's Danny Raw. Although who knows, maybe they'll pick another rabbit out the hat. But it looks very much. And this is what I'm struggling with it in terms of when Andrew Kavanagh says that me and Parag, we're the guys, we're going to sort all this out, and all of a sudden they've pivoted back to, well, actually it's Kevin Thelwell's job. Make it make sense.
I know.
And by the way, Kevin Thelwell, whose position should probably be untenable by now, given some of the decisions that he's made, the major decisions, the £10 million up to £10 million for Chimiti, who comes in as a striker who, with no track record of goal scoring, getting rid of two strikers that Rangers had that at the same time that were goal scorers, Egaman and Dessers, selling two left backs and bringing a left back on loan to develop him. And a kid that looks nowhere near first team ready, appointing his own son as the head of recruitment, astonishing, and obviously, rubber stamping Russell Martin's appointment in the first place. I don't know what more this guy needs to do to make Andrew Kavanagh think, maybe we should be looking at a different direction with this.
Aye, I'm actually I'm really taken aback by the news.
Seriously, see people look at Kevin Thelwell's decisions, everything that has been decided upon during his time as the decision maker. It's difficult to see a single solitary choice that he's made that has made Rangers better. Everything he's done has made it worse. It's quite staggering, actually.
I can't disagree with you for a second now. They've actually, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but last season we thought this is a pretty average, mediocre Rangers team. They're not going to, they need a big upgrade. If anything, they've significantly downgraded.
But they've downgraded in just about every position that they've brought in.
More or less, aye. more or less every position.
And not only that, but obviously this is Russell Martin's away now, so it doesn't matter so much. But the fallouts with the best players that you had, were asking, the decision very early on, and it was a good indicator. I think it was the pre-season match, possibly against Bruges, and Connor Barron led Rangers out the tunnel that day with the captain's armband on. And you were looking, going, he's got a problem with Nico Raskin. Why wouldn't you have Raskin? If Tavernier's not your captain, surely it's Raskin. So that was an early indicator. And everything that Russell Martin did after that, none of it made sense in terms of falling out, trying to get rid of players that he then had to later realise that they were the go-to guys in his squad, the only guys that he could actually trust, that the players that he brought in were effective downgrades in every position. And listen, if you're Steven Gerrard and you're coming in and you're asking, or you're asked to have a chat with the owners, and you're looking at that squad, Steven Gerrard or any manager worth his salt is going to look at that and say, that's a hospital pass they're throwing me here. Because how are you supposed to make that better when it's quite clearly a squad that's in serious regression and you've spent millions of pounds doing it? It's absolutely, it's farcical, that's what it is.
I know we're almost out of time, Keith, but there's so many comments coming in. Do you mind if I run through a couple more just before we wrap?
By the way.
Let me have a look. Okay, so this one here from John, he says, this is proof positive. Andrew Kavanagh does not understand what's required for a club to win in Scottish football. The Sniper says, Dan and Keith, looks like we just need to roll with it. I'm sure that won't get tiring anytime soon. Ian says, bringing Barry to the end of the season. What a disaster this has turned out to be. And this one from Sarah Connor, don't know if it's the same one from the Terminator, but we'll see. It rolls the board, dream higher, cheap, trendy, and a brilliant at talking about long-term vision. Will the fans pay for the short-term pain? He'll come with fancy training drills, an Instagram strategy, and a binder of tactics that look great on paper. Meanwhile, we'll be collecting home defeats like they're souvenirs. John also says Danny Rowe has a 38% win ratio. They'd be better off with Jelly Roll. So I think that more or less encapsulates the feeling amongst Rangers fans tonight.
Well, again, and you know what's, and it wouldn't be Danny Rowe's fault, right? It wasn't Russell Martin's fault. He wanted the job. Why wouldn't you want the job? He got the job. The real blame lies with the people that are making these appointments. And that's where Rangers have got a real credibility issue and something that needs to be addressed by the owners. Because if you bring in Danny Rowe, and I think that's absolutely correct in terms of, there'll be plenty of buzzwords. He's a young guy. He's, I'm sure he's into social media, all this stuff, right? And that's fine if that's the way you want to go. But if you're bringing him in, and this is what I'm going to say about how difficult this could quickly become for a guy like Danny Rowe. If he was to come in and results, there wasn't an instant upturn. Meanwhile, Rangers supporters are looking across the M8 and seeing old school Derek McInnes, streaming further away at the top of the table from Rangers, getting results. And maybe there'll be a realisation as well that Derek McInnes isn't the dinosaur that some people have made him out to be. He's put himself in a position now as a head coach with a club which is driven by data and algorithms, and he's made the transition pretty well as far as anybody could see, as far as the results are concerned. So how difficult does that then become if Danny rolls in and he's saying this and that and results do not change, but it's against the backdrop of Derek McInnes offering up a sustained title challenge at the top end of the table while Rangers fall away from it. It's when I say hospital pass, I'm struggling to think of one that would be more dangerous than the one that Rangers are somehow putting themselves in the middle of right now.
Well, look, whatever happens in the coming days and weeks, we will have you covered here on Record Sport on the Hotline Live. But for tonight, I think, Keith, that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you so much for all the comments. We massively appreciate it. We'll be back to do it all again at 6 p.m. tomorrow, a little bit earlier because Scotland aren't putting in an eye-bleedingly boring performance tomorrow night to make us later, but there you go.
Can we end up on an upbeat, please?
I know. I feel
3
bad.
more points and we're on our way to the World Cup.
Exactly. Let's do it. We hope you can join us then at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Again, thanks for your comments tonight. And Keith, it's always a pleasure.
And likewise, Dan.
Thanks for watching. Cheers.
Cheers.